Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast. Apologies for not being on air yesterday, but I'm afraid I wasn't well. We're going to cover the press conference today. I've got Stuart Lockhead with me. Hi, Stuart.
Hello there.
I'm Norrie Stewart. Jimmy's out beating the tarmac to death with his taxi, hopefully. So we're going to cover the press conference, have a wee chat about Ben McPherson and Kate Forbes not being able to get to speak to Priti Patel. And I've forgotten, what was it? Oh yes, Boothman's piece.
John Boothman,
in the Times,
who used to run the BBC News at Pacific Key. He's got not quite incendiary, but it's a bit of a firework article.
Covering Mr. Gobe's plans to fight independence in Scotland, or defend the Union, I think possibly is the way he would rather it was.
I would imagine he's probably a founding member of Scotland in Union. They're really extreme. Are they the
that's Effie Deans and whatnot?
Yeah,
Pennington.
They're fairly extreme.
So let's kick off for the press conference. Anything catch your ear today, Stuart?
Well, slightly good news is that we could say that the figures are now blunting. That means they're not accelerating. We're still going over 1,122 fresh cases reported since yesterday, but that's over 1,000 a day. So that, we're rolling up. Fortnight ago it was about 44,000. Now it's 57, nearly 58,000. That's going up, but it is not going up faster. It's actually going up slower. Does that make sense?
There are new cases. There just aren't as many new cases.
Yes, there aren't as many new cases as yesterday, and there aren't as many new cases as the day before. So that's a bit of good news. And from our point of view, it looks as though Lothian, where we are now, is not. We could end up dropping out of the Central Belt thingy on Monday. Who knows? Fingers crossed. Although I gather Dundee might be jumping into the higher category.
Yeah.
Judging by a question. She was talking today about the strategic framework, that they're still having discussions with the councils, as well as, I think that they had the opposition part leaders last week. The debate's tomorrow, and there won't be a press briefing tomorrow. The decision will presumably be made after that, and everything comes into force on Monday. The world will change.
Well, or it won't. I think it's more likely not to change, to be honest. I think maybe she'll be able to throw a bone to the islands. I think they'll be on either level 0 or level 1.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
So there will be some places who get clarity.
We can expect it not to be health board areas. That was part of what she'd said the other day, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, if she's going to hive the islands off on a different level, it won't be health board areas, will it?
No, they're there. I'm not sure how that works.
But
there could also be, say, for example, southern Scotland. There could be a difference between Dumfries and Galloway and Borders. Now, they are different health board areas, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be really quite difficult, and it's going to generate. I can see they're now at the point with the press conference of talking about individuals. There's 5 million people in Scotland, and there was a question today about Jimmy Smith, who had a problem with his test coming back, and both Health Minister and Sturgeon could say, yeah, we'll look into this individual case because you've given us the details. Can you imagine the mayhem if that happened across Scotland? If everybody whose test didn't arrive within 24 hours or whatever phoned up the government and asked them to look into it.
I got the feeling that one of the journalists, which one was it, was asking about, oh yeah, the Mail. Different, same thing, but basically the same topic in the sense that even if the case that you referred to there was real, the tabloid journalists grab on that because that's what gets the emotion and that's what they can make a headline story out of. And then Rachel Watson of the Mail, oh, a policeman told me that so many people resent the rules and the restrictions, and what do you feel about that? And you're thinking, what policeman? Yeah, you just made that up. You don't even need to name a policeman,
there's bound to be a policeman somewhere that
who
has
would
met
say
somebody
if you want them to,
who resents the rules.
Yeah. It's just like, as we talked about the other day about vox pops. If you're going to stop somebody in the street, you already know what you want, the answer you want. You stop people enough of them to get the answer you want. It's not.
And it depends on how you ask the question. Out of the 5,000 people you spoke to last week, how many resented being under lockdown? Oh, I met one guy, and that's you got your answer. I mean, it's great. I think for those of us who are total anoraks and like to see the minutiae, to watch how these guys have operated during these press conferences to journalists. So they were worse than I thought they would be, I have to say.
But yes.
Although I have noticed recently that they are finally starting, the more sensible amongst them, are finally starting to use it as a way to elicit information.
Well, over the weekend, there was a bit of a Barney on Twitter. And I'm afraid the previous presiding officer at Holyrood, Tricia Marwick, wasn't happy. And it led to a huge stoogie. And yet 95% of everything that followed, it was, now who backed him up? Kenny Fackerson.
The journalists backed journalists.
And 95% of all the tweets after Kenny Fackerson, there could have been loads supporting him, but they weren't there. And the people who are objecting to the way he put it were being very reasonable. Nobody was swearing or anything, calling him a yoon or anything. Oh, here, yes, no, we've got. I've just today's presser. There was a third one. What was this? Shona Duffy. She's obviously got a soft play business, because she was asking again about what about soft play owners, and what level will they be in? And it's like she actually got an answer for the First Minister. I mean, I'm sorry, I guarantee she's got a pal with a soft play business, because that's the third time she's asked a question about it.
I'll tell you, if they're having to follow the rules and they have to clean every one of those plastic balls in the ball pit,
don't even mention them.
I'm really glad I don't work in a soft play area.
Not going there. Do you remember the one down at New Haven? God, I remember going in there with somebody quite fairly often, and the smell of pee and wee from those ball pits.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how they would ever be able to clean one of those places.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not really blaming that one in particular, but you're right. That's the way I see it.
I was about to say about the journalist tweet Rami at the weekend. I always find it strange that journalists insist on having freedom of speech, but insist nobody else can.
Oh, right, yes.
So they can criticize who they like, but you can't criticize them. I don't quite know how they square that particular circle, but they seem content to try time and time again.
I think they're a superior species.
Well, if they came out and said, look, we've got more information on this than you don't know what you're talking about, that's fine. But they're not stupid. They know somebody will come back and say, well, actually, I'm the guy that runs, or I work for, or I manage, or I spent 20 years doing, and you don't know what you're talking about,
And of course, with this pandemic, none of these journalists knew any more about it than you or I did when it started.
And they know far less about it even now.
Yes, because they've got other jobs to do where you and I have been studying it for practically every day.
I wouldn't say that I know more about it than they do, but I'm pretty sure Jason Leach does.
Oh, aye. There was another piece of news. Challenged about, what was it? Clarity, what was it? Reckless. Yes, she was accused by Chris Musson about reckless practice back in the spring about these care homes and old people coming out, being sent from hospital where they tested or not. The inquiry into that by Public Health Scotland will be published on Wednesday. So and it's the only part of the UK, according to the First Minister, that's having an inquiry into that.
I don't expect any inquiry anytime soon from Westminster into their position on this. This will be left in the long grass until the pandemic's over and it's all kind of forgotten about. And I actually think that would have been a sensible way to go for this one, because the minutiae of this will be torn apart by the tabloids. When did you know? Testing. Why didn't you test absolutely everybody? Conveniently forgetting that there weren't the tests, there wasn't the ability in the labs to test, etc., etc., etc.
They made value decisions that they needed the capacity in the hospitals. They felt that old people were at risk if they were left in hospitals, and they didn't know that asymptomatic people could be infectious.
And it will all be argued from what we know now, not what we knew then.
And the other side of the coin is that the same thing happened in Ireland and almost certainly in nursing homes across the world.
Well, Spain is a good example. Italy is another example.
Australia.
No, this will all be done as though we had the full knowledge that we have now, and it'll be used as a stick to beat every government. It won't just be the SNP that get a kicking. They'll get the worst kicking because that's the way our press works. But every government will end up getting beaten up on this unless they can postpone the inquiry into the future long grass.
Well, talking about getting a kicking, the press really did get a kicking over the weekend. They really on social media. I was impressed by the language that was used because it was restrained, but it was pointed out what we've said. We never actually had seen them in action quite so blatant. We weren't allowed to see just how bad they were until now, and which has been what's been absolutely incredible to see the way they question the First Minister a lot of the time.
I mean, you can sit there and read and write the headline that they want for tomorrow.
Yeah,
it's that simple, And they've cottoned on to the First Minister in the past had always done that. Could you please send those details of Jimmy blogs to us and we'll deal with it. They now wait until 5 minutes before they ask the question and send the details, so that they can say, but we sent you the details about this. So she now makes a point of saying, yes, we received those details 5 minutes before we came to the press conference. Thank you for that.
Well, we did discover something, I think, today that we possibly didn't know about. The students, we knew that Christmas was going to come up again. Students, that's complicated about them going home and then coming back to university or college again after Christmas. They haven't figured out how to handle that yet.
Pick your headline. Students get locked up for Christmas. Students spread virus all over the UK when they leave to go home for Christmas. Pick your headline. Mm-hmm. There is not going to be a headline that says sensible decision made by Scottish government, whatever they do. I mean, and it's that ridiculous. When we look at this a year from now, and we start analysing what was said on the front pages of the majority of papers, but especially the tabloids, you're going to see a situation where effectively the newspapers undermined the government message.
That's what I was saying over the weekend. These are the journalists in Scotland are responsible for a lot of deaths by broadcasting confused messages and encouraging resistance.
Well, I would say by pointing out everybody should be confused. I'm not confused. Are you?
Well, we're up to speed most of the time, and we study it every day. The pandemic.
I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't know. And do you know how I know? Because when they break the rules, they go, but I've got an excuse for breaking this rule. So you know what the rule is then? They don't say I'm confused about the rules. It was an accident. You know, they say I'm going to visit my brother up in Aberdeen because I've got an excuse. He's not well, or, you know, I need to hand him money, whatever the excuse is. They know they shouldn't be doing it. They don't turn around and say, oh, I'm confused, so I'm going to Aberdeen. So people know full well where they stand. And if they don't, it's their own fault. That's my tuppence worth.
Okay. Enough of the presser, shall we say?
Yeah. Interesting article in the National today. Kate Forbes has Ben McPherson, who is, full disclosure here, our local MSP, has been trying to get a meeting, has asked 7 times now, for a meeting with Priti Patel, Home Secretary.
Not herself, no, with her junior minister.
Well, a meeting with somebody.
A ministerial level meeting.
About putting care home workers on the allowed list of immigration.
Exactly. They're going to need more care workers from abroad after Brexit it comes down, whatever it is. Suddenly I've got a sight like a guillotine coming down, but on the 1st of January. But the rules for bringing in foreign staff to look after our desperately needed old people will change on the 1st of January.
Well, no, the rules for bringing people in to do anything from overseas, freedom of movement stops on the 1st, effectively, midnight on the 31st of December. But there is a list of prescribed occupations that you can be taken off the prescribed list if it's felt that your particular occupation is needed. Nurses, I believe, are on them. And it's all based around a 24,000 a year income. Now, apparently the average earnings for a care home worker are 20,000. So they want discussions about allowing care home workers in from abroad.
But she's Forbes, Kate Forbes, who's a very accomplished finance minister. She says, as winter approaches, we need to anticipate that the pressure on staff will rise even further. We should be doing all we reasonably can to reduce that pressure to ensure appropriate standards of care. Scottish Government should have the ability to influence and determine what is on the Scotland Shortage Occupation List, which is a long way of saying what you've just said. And basically, 7 requests for a meeting with, I've got the guys, Kevin Frost or something, the minister, that they're just not answering. I mean,
well, cue a question in a couple of weeks to the First Minister from the Tory opposition at Holyrood. Why can we not recruit more care home workers? Because there's a shortage. Making out that the Tories care about that when the solution is in the hands of their own government at Westminster. Or, well, not total solution, but part of the solution is there. So I foresee a lot of things like this where the Scottish Government will be prohibited from doing things. A, because of money, because that's the other announcement that came out today. Rishi Sunak told the Scottish government there was going to be no more money based on his new scheme, his new open-ended scheme for England on his tier 3, because we'd already had 7 million.
700 million.
Sorry, 700 million. So if that's all you're getting, boys, the First Minister is going to find it very difficult to enact her level 4 and 5 if there's no more money coming.
Mm-hmm.
Now that money was to cover the previous scheme.
Oh,
So they're in effect, they're saying you're not getting what England's getting. Scotland.
Yeah, I know that. I know it's appalling. That surely we can't depend on our mainstream media to scream about that, or London television.
Well, the Tories knew it was coming, and Douglas Ross was out there spinning the 700 million already, claiming that the Scottish government had only used 40 million of it, forgetting to mention that the 40 million was out of Scottish government funds, had nothing to do with Barnett.
Alister Jack yesterday, when he was on Brewer, he was doing the same thing, 700 million pounds, and you got them ahead of our announcement. That's a lie, because they didn't know 2 weeks ago when the 700 million pounds came down what Sunak was going to announce.
The 700 million was attached to previous Barnett consequentials.
Yeah.
And they're just hoping that they can get away with it. Which brings us quite neatly onto the story about Gove setting up a Save the Union unit
yes.
by employing 2, now what are they, PR people?
2 full-time government press officers will be assigned to combat Scottish National Party publicity.
Because the Scottish papers are forever boosting the Scottish government.
Oh, they absolutely never stop telling the world how wonderful the Scottish National Party are. And further special advisors are likely to be recruited, which means they're going to spend our money, taxpayers' money, to pay somebody to tell lies about the Scottish government.
Well, we'll just think about how much devolution means to them, that they feel the need to spend my taxpayers' money, my money, on fighting the government I voted for. If that doesn't prove the union is finished, I don't know what does.
There's an interesting, this article was written principally by John Boothman, who used to, she married to who?
It'll be some Labour person.
Oh, what was that? A senior Labour minister in the last Labour government at Holyrood. Anyway, but he was the main man in charge of the news at BBC Pacific Key. There's an interesting way of describing here. Ministers have been shocked by polling evidence that the UK government has had no credit for the coronavirus furlough scheme, which Scottish voters believe is a Scottish government programme. I don't know where the evidence for that very last item is, but immediately goes on to say, they are also concerned that most broadcast appearances by UK ministers are never seen by Scottish voters. Now, before we argue about that fact or not, the way it's written, it implies that the polling says that, but it doesn't say that the polling says that. It just said that. The writer just said that. And as you and I know, and as anybody who lives in Scotland knows, your chances of catching sight of a Scottish government minister on BBC, ITV, Channel 4 is tiny.
Well, Brewer's programme on Sunday was a good example of how the BBC present this now. Any Scottish minister that's on the BBC is talking about COVID. They're not talking about politics. The whole discussion with Swinney was based around COVID. There was no wider UK politics questions asked of him, anything like that. It was all to do with COVID. Then Union Jack came on and it was all politics, nothing to do with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're giving what appears to be equal airtime, they're on totally different subjects. Swinney wasn't asked to defend anything that the UK government were spouting, but Jack was given an open platform, total opportunity. And Brewer let him ramble on. He did try to interrupt him when he started with his lists, but failed to do so.
I mean, did he not start the show with the front page of the Sunday Mail? The Minister of Misery.
Yeah, yeah. And that was part of the stushy we spoke about earlier. Oh, how wonderful are our journalists, full of integrity and decent people. And then they bring out, the Mail brings out a front page with Swinney on the front beside the head of one of the murdering clown movie stars. I mean, if they're going to troll Swinney like that, why should we treat them with any respect?
And then apparently there was a bishop, I don't know, a bishop of what the bishop of the Wee Frees. Apparently he wants there to be a truce on Christmas Day, if there is a truce on all the restrictions. But the virus won't be taking a day off. They won't be. They can't sign up for a truce. They'll still carry on infecting people.
We should send this guy to negotiate with the virus. When the virus goes into the room with him, we'll seal the doors, and that's the job done. No more virus. I mean, he might die while he's trying to negotiate an amnesty with the virus. But I mean, bishops tend not to be stupid people. This guy did not think through his analogy at all.
No, he's not the only one that suggested it, of course.
And by the way, the truce was between the men on the front line. It wasn't between the officers back at HQ.
One other word that Gordon Brewer used just before he signed off with John Swinney was he instead of talking about tiers or levels, it could have been informative, though. He called it stages. Why did he pick his own word for it?
I think he was worried. I really do think that he didn't want to call it either tiers and be accused by the rabid cybernats of trying to make it an English issue, or levels and being accused by the rabid Yuns of taking Sturgeon's side. So we went for stages.
I think he did get fed up asking Jack questions, because Jack just had decided just to talk and talk and talk and talk. And he finished up saying, well, I've had enough, basically. You're just giving us the greatest hits again.
Yeah. Aye.
And it was his second last appearance, Gordon Brewer's appearance.
Wednesday might be interesting.
Yeah. What time is that show normally on?
Oh, it's afternoon at 2:15 or 2:30.
Well, that's good, but he will be watching Holyrood live, because the debate, the chamber will be.
We'll catch some of it. I'll catch some of it.
Catch some of it.
In the vain hope that Gordon goes ballistic at somebody. I'm sick of asking questions you bastards don't answer. That would be good.
I could do a Derek Bateman.
Well, maybe it'll affect his pension, so he'll have to call Canny.
It might be too late. Well, man, who knows, eh? Patrick Harvey had made an appearance on the Brewer show as well. What did he get asked? Oh, yes, he did say, listening to Alister Jack, I could barely keep a straight face. Because
I'm sorry.
Patrick's usually very relaxed. He doesn't get wound up on questions about anything.
I still find it very difficult to trust the Greens.
How could he justify what he was saying? All he said was he was asked is a majority. The question is, next Holyrood election, if the SNP don't get a majority themselves in the Parliament, will they still be allowed? Should they still have a referendum? God, I should have phrased that rather badly. And of course, what Gordon Brewer was trying to find out was, well, Patrick Harvey said, well, it doesn't need to be a majority of that, as long as it's a majority of pro-independence. In other words, you can vote for us Greens.
I thought Brewer came up with quite a neat solution to that, because we know what will happen. If the SNP do not get a majority, but have a majority with the Greens, that won't be a real majority as far as the Unionists are concerned. Not that it'll matter, even if the SNP do get a majority, it'll still not be a real majority. But Brewer's solution to having the same wording about a second independence referendum in both manifestos, I thought was an interesting solution. Because nobody can then claim that what the Greens were asking for was different to what the SNP were asking for.
There's a thing I don't really want to even bother discussing, all these list parties and things. I suspect they're all going to cancel each other out by the time we get to May.
I'm even more worried now about lack of manifestos, and I mean, I don't think the umbrella one, which hasn't been okayed by the Electoral Commission yet, I can't see how that'll work.
I think there are 4 pro-independence list parties, plus the Greens, plus the SNP.
Are you hiding from the viewers intentionally?
Maybe I should show you. Look, see. I was just thinking. I don't look at myself when I'm thinking. You know, do you?
No, I don't look at myself ever.
4 pro-independence list parties and at least 2 anti-independence list parties. Now, I think at the moment, lining up.
Well, I can't see the umbrella group getting the okay, because I think that'll be out with the rules. Because you're essentially.
Don't you think they're all going to sort of cancel each other out?
Well, I hope not. I think there's a good argument for there being one independent sporting list party. But I'm not sure how honest that party could be.
Maybe the Greens will just surprise us and get sensible.
Well, I mean, I think the Greens have a very good chance of scaring Labour.
Well, that's what they've suggested. I mean,
I don't think they'll beat them, but I think they might give them a scare.
They've got to, after all, that's got to be a target. You've always got to be ambitious before you go into an election, don't you?
Well, I'm hoping that some of those who backed the Tories last time because they didn't trust Corbyn will slip back to Labour, which makes it a big job for the Greens to beat Labour. But I would far rather face a Labour opposition than a Tory opposition.
Did you see was it BBC? It must have been the BBC little special independence piece put together by James Cook. He lined up a couple of people that had gone from no to yes, and then he managed to find a couple of people that went from yes to no.
Yeah, I did see it.
And
it started well and then let itself down, shall we say?
The man that he lined up that apparently went from yes to no is a GMB union official, and as far as I know, they are the deep swamp cesspit of British Labour in Scotland.
Well, don't forget the Scottish Trade Union Congress has come out in favour of a second independence referendum.
Yeah, but don't forget the GMB are the people that are responsible for the women and all the women workers at Glasgow City Council having to wait years to get their entitlements.
But Richard Leonard is ex-GMB.
Yeah, well,
I'd be really surprised if they didn't take his official stance, which is no to a second referendum.
Anyway, I wasn't convinced by their that fellow. I can't imagine this guy being a GMB official and voting. Yeah, apparently there's no evidence of any social media activity by this guy before 2016. He's done the clever thing. He's got nothing. There's no evidence. Whatever he was saying before 2016 on Twitter and Facebook, it's all gone.
Well, what was the other thing we were going to mention?
Well, we could go on and on, but I'm not sure, actually. What else?
We've covered Kate Forbes, Brewer, Gove's 2 new press officers.
Yeah, I think we covered him.
You wanted to say a little bit about Gordon Brewer before we finished.
Yeah, we did. I think I've said it. He's finishing up this Wednesday. I've said what I want, I think.
Well, give us a points out of 10 for Gordon as a political interviewer.
He's never finishes on time, ever. He's the world's worst. He wouldn't, but he'd get disciplined at Leith FM, and we were always pretty slack there. But you had to finish in time because you had to end your show on time in Leith FM because the news came on, whether you liked it or not. The news came on in the hour, didn't it?
I've always thought that Gordon was on the wrong side of the mic. He takes so long to ask a question. I might actually go onto iPlayer and time the amount of time he speaks compared to the time the person gets to answer. I always felt he needed to Twitterize. He needed to get the number of characters in the question down a bit.
And I'm surprised he never wrote very much. He doesn't publish. I can't recall reading any articles by him.
I can't remember anything. I'm sorry to hear Isabel Fraser's going, because deep in my soul, I wanted her to come back and replace Gordon Brewer.
Yeah.
She was a fiery minx. She could put the boot in when it was called for.
No, that would be a Saturday morning. She used to do the Good Morning Scotland on the weekend, which used to be quite good.
What was the show she used to do where she took on that idiot that wanted to bayonet the wounded after the... What's his name? I've forgotten his name.
Ian
Davidson.
I've got his photograph around, somewhere.
And
the quote that he wants to bayonet the wounded, yes.
And
he disappeared. After that.
Oh no! He's standing down in Jedburgh for the Labour Party.
Ian Davidson.
Yep, that's where he comes from originally.
What do you mean he's standing there?
He stood as a Labour candidate.
Is he against whom?
Oh, I'll be a Tory down there, won't it? For Westminster. Oh, he wouldn't deign to stand for the devolved Parliament.
Oh, right, okay.
Good Lord.
Oh, no. He stood against John Lamont.
I think so.
Or Lamont, or whatever he is, I can't remember.
But he's a Gala boy. Well, he's a Jedburgh boy that went to Gala Academy.
Yeah, right.
And then he moved over to the West. Pigleski. I can't even remember where he stood. But he was chair of the Scottish Affairs Committee throughout the first referendum. He was a fairly big hitter, Ian Davidson, in his day. He was a dirty fighter, like when it came to politics. Old school Labour. Jackets off round the back kind of guy.
Lanarkshire.
Well, as I say, he's a borderer. Alex Grant knew him personally. They were in the same line of business when they were students.
Didn't you know him because you went to school?
No, he was different generation. My brother knew him. He was in the same year as my brother. My brother thought very lowly of him, as opposed to highly. He didn't have a lot of time for him.
No.
But there you go.
I know that Gordon Brewer meant well, but goodness knows you would have thought, well, hey ho. I know that he had a serious illness only a few years ago, so I'm sure when he got the offer, here's the redundancy or your pension.
Well, they're going to cap the redundancy packages to 90,000, I think it is. So we're going to have to presume that Gordon got a bit more than that, which is why all the old gens are going while the going's good, apparently.
Well, that makes some sort of sense.
Anyway, on that sad note, we'll call it a day. Thanks for being with me, Stuart.
Okay, no problem. Just for the people looking, that's the Greg Moody cartoon comes out on a Monday. There's 8 pictures. I could only show you one because they'd be too small. And it's a reference to Toby Young, who is he's one hair away from Genghis Khan. And what does he say? Shut it, jockey. Go and cry yourself to sleep over the Bay City Trollers records.
I wonder if he could be done for hate speech.
He would, if it was talking about black people, he would be. He'd be in jail. But apparently, you're allowed to call us jockos and all kinds of things because we're Scots.
Oh right, okay. Because we're white Scots.
Sweaty socks and things like that.
Well, sticks and stones may break my bones, as lack of food at dinner time for children, but names will never hurt me. That's the other stussy we didn't mention. The upset the Tories are, how upset the Tories are being called scum, and how little they care about children going hungry.
Waiting for it to be the end of the row.
Yeah, we'll see.
You can wave flags when they lose, when they have to U-turn.
When they eventually U-turn,
yeah. When they eventually U-turn.
Okay, call it a day at that. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow. Cheers for now.